Melissa, given that Linda's on site, would you like her to go ahead and preside?
Yes, Linda, Deputy Treasurer, should preside over the meeting. I'll be participating for one half of the meeting before going to the governor's office, so in Deputy Treasurer's capable hands.
Thank you. Thanks, Secretary. Good morning. Is this working?
Yes.
Okay. We'd like to get started. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Linda Savitsky. I'm the Deputy Treasurer, and I will be running and chairing the meeting today. The Secretary of OPM, Melissa McCaw, is on the phone, as well as Marie Moreland from the Office of the State Treasurer.
I think David's walking.
And David, are you on the phone? We're going to do the best we can to get out of here in an hour, but my hope is that we will not go beyond 11:30. We have the approval of the minutes. We're going to have a lengthy discussion about the 1920. David and Secretary Marie, the city distributed the paper copy, so we will make sure that we bring back copies for those of you in Hartford. And David, would you like us to mail yours?
Yeah, or email them.
It's a paper copy, so...
So everybody should
All
have
right,
electronic.
I've got a different address. Julian will need to reach out to me for my new address.
Okay. I know Julian gave everybody a link to the budget, but this is the
Right.
paper copy. We're going to have a limited discussion on the 5-year plan, really more about where we are. And I think the plan is that we will discuss the 5-year plan in greater depth at a subsequent meeting. Any other business that you might have that you wish to bring up, and as I said, our goal is to really adjourn by 11 with ample opportunity, but no later than 11:30. So are there any questions or comments about the agenda as I've laid out?
Yeah, I have a question.
Sure.
And I understand I don't necessarily disagree with you with the hour theory on meetings, but the meeting is noticed from 10 a.m. to 12:30.
Right. Is that your question?
Well, it's a question and a statement, I guess. Let me expand on that. I think with the schedule of our meetings, being that they're not multiple times during the month periods, that we really need to then sit down and discuss and allot time as a committee and as a board to be able to have the time to discuss and go through the fairly voluminous documents that are before us.
I don't disagree. I think that's why we really are not going to spend hardly any time at all on the 5-year plan. The focus is to try to spend as much time at this meeting on the budget itself, because that is really the thing that's in front of us right now that we need to devote our energy to. The other thing, it's just a general comment. There are a lot of emails that come back and forth among the members and among the committee members, and I just want to remind everybody that as a member of this committee, that all you do it on your personal email or your business, it is subject to the Freedom of Information law. So it's very important that you think carefully when you hit the reply all button, because what this is doing is every single thing that you do that we get is all open to public records, and it's open to people who might wish to make a statement, so to request copies. So I think we need to ask people to be very careful, about what you're saying, because even though you may use your personal email, you're using it for the business of the state, and therefore it is subject to the Freedom of Information. So I'm sure that you've had this discussion before. I just wanted to sort of bring it back to everybody's mind. So with that, the first item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes of March 12th. You've all had a chance to look at a motion from Commissioner Jackson. Is there a second?
Second.
Tad Egan, are there any comments, questions, discussions, corrections? Seeing none, all those in favor of approving the minutes as presented signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And I'm going to abstain. Oh, Secretary McCaw, you were actually at that meeting. Do you want to vote yes? Vote the affirmative, I mean? She's already gone. Okay, I'm abstaining because I wasn't at the meeting.
She might just have something.
Yeah, okay. Next item on the agenda is the review and discussion of the fiscal 1920 budget. And I'm going to turn it over to Julian, who's probably going to rapidly kick it right over to the mayor and to the finance director.
I was going to hand it off to the mayor and finance director for an overview, and then I'm prepared to walk us through some of the high-level changes, of course, and then relate the budget back to the fiscal year 20 as it was originally built into the 5-year plan.
Okay. So the plan that we put together was very detailed. A lot of extent, we tried to do it I tried to do it from a zero-based budgeting perspective, going off of what the current spending rates were, as opposed to just copying over from the prior budget. From that perspective, we did find some areas of savings. One thing to note is in this particular budget, I know the 5-year plan had roughly $1 million worth of efficiencies built into it. That line we pulled out only because a lot of those efficiencies we felt were going to be soft savings from doing things better, and we are in the process of investigating electrical cost with the CC through the CCM program. That was not built into there. We have not gotten any hard numbers from them yet, so that would show as a favorable variance to the budget once those electricity costs come in. Personnel, there were 3, I believe, open positions that were eliminated from the budget. The police department is getting new positions filled. We did not take anything from public safety. The revenues themselves, we were level loaded as far as state funding from the ECS, etc. We did have a change to the grand list that came through, and those numbers have been reflected in the revenues in the budget before you. Every department head, where I felt needed to, I went back and had conversations with them to make sure that they were comfortable, especially with the larger departments such as the police. Other than that, I think everything is consistent. It is a balanced budget. It did come through with no mill rate increase, and I know the 5-year plan did have a mill rate increase built into it. But at this time, we thought that was not needed, as we were able to balance the budget without increasing the mill rate. And at that point, I'll give it back to Julie.
Good morning, this is Melissa McCoff. I did pop in for a question. So I understand that based on the more favorable grand list roads, you did not include the mill rate increase, but you did continue to assume state support with respect to the municipal restructuring fund.
That is correct.
I'd like to have as a follow-up what mill rate increase would be warranted to eliminate that state support. So we had a plan whereby the town was more than comfortable with increasing their mill rate to cover increased expenses, and that even when doing so, the town needed additional state resources. And so what I'm struggling with currently is that you were able to balance this budget, mitigate a mill rate increase, but yet you're still depending on the state of Connecticut to subsidize your budget. So I would, in terms of order of preference, it would be most appropriate that the town responsibly cover their own cost increases before relying on state support. And so that is one area of the proposed budget currently stands that I would say I think needs to be revisited.
Madam Secretary, can I take you back on that?
Yes.
A related question is how much more in property tax revenue are you receiving under this budget as a result of the higher land list than you originally anticipated?
I'm going to repeat the question. It's Mr. Walker. How much of, let me get this straight, Dave. How much of a property, more revenue are you getting from property tax increase in the value of the grand list related to this budget,
As compared to the 5-year plan.
as compared to the 5-year plan. I don't know if you can hear it, you probably can't hear the phone out there.
It's a little bit over $1 million because of, we had a lesser increase in the grand list in the 5-year plan because we were very conservative.
As I recall, you assumed like a 0.1% increase in the grand list, and the actual is 1.4. So a 1.3% difference would seem to be more than $1 million, unless the math is working.
Just,
Go ahead.
Dave, I think it was a 0.3 assumption for FY20, and the updated plan is 1.1.
Okay, fine, so a 0.8 difference. So your grant list is just over $100 million?
Who's asking the value of the grand list?
No, the grand list is
0.6 billion.
2.6 million. 2.6 billion, rather. Right.
So I believe there's a really great exhibit that shows the 5-year plan assumes a net grant list of 2.66 billion. The fiscal 2020 recommended is 2.683 billion. So I guess the question, Mr. Walker, you might be asking is, now that we have clarification that the plan assumes 0.3% and they've experienced grant list growth north of 1%, had you applied the mill rate that was assumed in the original 5-year plan, how much additional revenues would this have generated?
Do you have that calculation, Frank?
I don't
I
have that
guess the
calculation.
bottom line, I have the same concern as you. To me, the state should be providing aid only if necessary to meet a stated objective. And the stated objective was to achieve a bottom line result. And therefore, we should not be subsidizing above and beyond achieving the bottom line result. And we can get it, we don't have to get into all the details about what the exact numbers were. I was talking about, not the grant list, I was talking about property tax revenues, annual property tax revenues. But intellectually, I think we're coming from the same place, Madam Secretary.
May I ask a question? With respect to the grand list increase, the plan was, which included the tax increase, was submitted, I believe, in October, version 4.0 or something like that. And 6 months later, you have a substantial increase in the grand list. I was just wondering what happened in between. Was this a one-time event, a development came online earlier than you thought? I mean, that's a pretty big variance within 6 months, and I know that predates you.
That's what I can certainly find out for you, but not having been there for the October piece, I'm not sure what happened in between.
If I can just add to that, I spoke with the assessor when we were preparing the 5-year plan, and at that point in time, she felt it was better to be conservative until we see what projects came in and what their value was, because again, there's been delays in various projects, one of which obviously is the Havens, and that's why we didn't book that in as well until they actually get started. And then we have Allentown development that's also been delayed. But that being said, when she did the grand list, and that's when we got the real number, it was as of October of 18, there was this increase in the grand list.
So in October 18, the one or both of these projects were online?
The Havens wasn't online. The other project in Allentown was online, and Yale is definitely rapidly.
Okay, but that was, you knew that in October, on October 1?
No, I'm saying the grand list that she did was as of October of 18. We didn't find out until we were doing the budget in 19. I mean, we're always behind that much. So she just prepared the grand list as we were doing the budget. So we didn't know in October 18, and believe me, I would have been happy to put it in the 5-year plan, but we did not know. And we were told to be very conservative unless we could prove our numbers.
So when did the city find out about what was the increase in the ground list?
1.1 million in 19. And I want to say it was either beginning of March.
When did she sign? The grand list has to be signed either February 28th or March 31st. When did she sign the grand list?
She would have signed the grand list, I believe,
In March.
In March.
It was in March, okay.
because I think she needed an extension just to make
Yeah.
sure. She didn't go to the end of March, but
I think what I'd like to do is, because I think what the questions that are coming in from our two members that are not here are going to be, it's going to be a continuous discussion. So what I'd like to do is sort of move ahead on a review of the other critical parts of the budget. So Frank, did you have anything more that you wanted to go through, or should I turn it back over to Julie?
No, we can turn it back over to you.
Okay.
Thank you. So I'll start with the area of property taxes.
Can you hear them?
Can you guys hear? So in the area of property taxes, as we've already covered, the increase was 1.1% to the grant list, which generated approximately an additional $1 million at the existing mill rate. And the budget proposed essentially flat mill rates, although sort of dividing them up amongst the legal, the real estate, and capital non-recurring a little bit. And if you do, in the narrative that we sent out to accompany the budget, there was an exhibit that it may answer some of the questions that were raised about how the proposal relates back to the plan. And so, at your leisure, I'll let you take a look at that. But what the exhibit shows is what the current levy would have been generated had the mill rates in the 5-year plan been applied to the updated grant list. And then there's another scenario that shows what the required mill rate would be at the updated grant list to generate the same tax levy. So there's a couple of different ways of looking at this, different angles to take. And then in both of those cases, everything else being equal, what would the reduction or the reduced reliance on restructuring funds have been had the budget proposal come in with either the same mill rate it's in the 5-year plan or using the same tax levy as the 5-year plan?
Any questions so far?
can I just add something to it? I was here, as everyone knows, for all the meetings, and I think I was one of the few that has been here for all the meetings. My argument is this for the city of West Haven. First off, we are doing better at growing our fund balance in the general fund because we projected a surplus in 18, and right now, if everything goes well, we're projecting a surplus in 19. I understand about the idea of just raising the mill rate. The problem is we have, a population of people that if we looked at median income and other things like that in our city, it's harmful to them. So my position is this. When I've read the statute, I read the statute with Whmarb when it first came out off the legislative thing that night back before I was elected to anything. And I guess what's bothering me is that, number one, Hartford was allowed to flatline their mill rate. Number two, they got a lot more money than we did, whether it's restructuring of debt or anything like that. And I guess what I'm asking for is, I think West Haven has turned the corner. We're doing everything that was asked of us. We're working very hard. We cut positions. We cut overtime. We cut a lot of different things to make this happen. It didn't happen by magic. And our unions gave back 0% increases, as we've all noticed here. There's been furlough days. It's not like it was just magically there. The Board of Ed has given back through their negotiations. I'm not saying that we want to be on this forever, because believe me, and I'm still waiting for, there's supposed to be an opinion from OPM on what constitutes 3 balanced budgets and whether or not it does include the restructuring money. But my problem is that right now to levy a tax increase, and in other words, if we were to remove the money, and as you can see how the taxes go up, the 5-year plan as it was proposed to me is just that. It was a plan, and we could make changes, and we were lucky because our grand list grew. And I'm hoping next year our grand list grows even more because we are actively marketing, and hopefully the OSTA certificate will come through, because that is the major holdup now with the Havens project to get demolition started. So all I'm asking is maybe for some consideration, and I get that it's the taxpayers' dollars, but I also remember what Mr. Walker says. And when you add, and we have to add the fire tax for the sake of total mill rate for the people, it's right around 50, which he says makes us not competitive if you look at as we go along in the 5-year plan. So that's my argument for the city of West Haven, and I know I'm going to get pushback for it, but I have to state it out there because I'm out. I see what people are doing. I see how many for sale signs are going up. I read what's going on, and a lot of our people are hurting. And I think another tax increase would just hurt them more.
Thank you, Mayor. I think what I want to do is we started the conversation to now go back and review. Hang on a second. We started the conversation to now go back and review the entire budget. What I'd like to do is continue the conversation on the rest of the budget, and when we're done with the budget, we'll go back and continue to discuss, if that's the pleasure of the board, the issue relating to the projected mill rate increase. But we could spend the entire hour, and the purpose of this meeting is to get people completely up to speed on what's in the budget, what's on the expenditure and the revenue side, what programs the city is looking to do that may have been identified in the 5-year plan, and I think that's just as important as having a philosophical discussion about, the role of the Whmarb money. So what I really want to do is just move forward with the rest of the discussion on the revenues and the discussion on the expenditures, and we'll make sure that there's time at the end to go back to react to what the mayor said.
I have a question that does not relate to the tax increase.
That's fine.
May I? Thank
Yeah.
you. I do notice, and thank you for the summary, Julian and colleagues. One of the things I didn't understand is, did the surplus for this year include the $1.75 million in deficit reduction that was not needed?
In the paperwork that came with the updated 5-year plan, I believe the tables did not include the 1.75 million, so
That is correct. So in the page that came through that had both the analysis with the original proposed budget, and then below is the FY19 forecast. That does not include the 1.75.
Where is that 1.75 million?
it would roll in the fund balance if it's unspent.
So it does.
It would augment that projected surplus.
Correct.
So it does roll in the fund balance?
Yes.
Is that something we should talk about?
It's accounting, that's the way, if the money's...
But it was, this predates me, but I thought that money was earmarked for deficit reduction that was not needed, and then it's just there.
But it still rolls into the fund balance, because that's really the way that the operations work. It may have been designated, but so might other things have been designated, which may or may not have been used. So it is part of the fund balance.
Yeah, so I have a question.
If I might clarify, this is Secretary McCraw. Those dollars only go into fund balance if the full amount of municipal restructuring funds is provided for the current year. So I do believe that there's an opportunity for the Whmarb committee to opine on what the next steps will be with respect to fiscal year 2019. I mean, the city is experiencing some favorability this year, and there is an open item for discussion and decision as to how much of the municipal restructuring funds would be provided under this scenario. So I think that's pending Whmarb decision.
Okay, so it is on the table. Thank you.
Right, and when it's talked about, when the surplus from 18, or statements that I've read in the papers talked about, does that include, when you use that, what was that number, $3 million?
2.18, I believe was it.
I heard a bigger number than that.
Overall. There was
And does that include that, you're including that 1.75 when you talk about a carry surplus or a positive fund balance?
The 1.75 is related to this year's expenses.
In projections?
Correct.
Wait, okay, right, okay. I have a couple of questions, and I'm going to have to apologize to the chair, but I need to respond to the statement that the mayor said.
I would really prefer that you not. We're going to do that later.
Unfortunately, I've taken time out of my day. This meeting was scheduled for 2.5 hours. For some reason, it's been reduced to an hour. I don't know why, okay? But I'm going to use my time to address just a statement that was made.
I said that we would get back, there would be plenty of time after we go through the rest of the budget. We can't spend another 30 minutes going back and forth on an item that we really, the purpose of this meeting was to go through the revenues and the expenditures for the fiscal 20 budget in detail. What you're describing is something that Whmarb is going to continue to have conversations about and deliberate about. And I think right now, regardless of how much time we all have, we need to go back to the budget itself.
Well-
And so I'm actually going to sort of ask you to step back on this item, and we're going to go to Julian, who's going to continue the discussion, and there will be plenty of time when he's done to go back to react to the mayor's
If the
comment.
chair's going to assure me that we'll have time.
Yes, I am. I assured it to you a minute.
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
Julian,
That's fine.
please.
So moving on from grand list and property tax related items, a large category of revenues is sources of state aid, which are held flat in the budget. No increases, which is consistent with the 5-year plan, which projected everything level funded throughout the 5-year period. This is consistent with the governor's proposed budget. The governor's budget does propose some increase to ECS and the Lions portion of ECS grant. But the plan has been, in terms of the 5-year plan, has been that the city would project level ECS funding, and that anything that was received above and beyond that amount would be used to assist the education budget with any growth on the expenditure side. So in that respect, state aid is consistent with the 5-year plan. The other sources of the budget make up a relatively small portion of the budget. There are some fairly sizable sources in there. Overall, those sources increased by about 3%. Most of them increased by 3%, many others are flat, but overall it's about 3%. There are a few items that move up or down to reflect recent activity. This is, we see this mostly in the permitting related revenue items, and also somewhat in the town clerk's recording fees. And the 5-year plan did project some reductions in permitting activity, and I believe that the budget proposes some reductions, not quite as steep. On the expenditure side, the overall the general fund decreases by about $1 million. This is about 0.6%. The most significant reductions here are the elimination of that $1.75 million that we talked about before, which was programmed into the current budget as a deficit reduction measure, and also the fee, the $250,000 fee paid to Whmarb for Whmarb expenses. Neither of those items carry forward in the FY20 budget, and neither of those items were contemplated in the 5-year plan for fiscal year 20. You do see, I'll get to the 2 months. Overall payroll expenses increased by 0.8%. We do have one correction to my narrative to make, which is attributing a portion of that to step increases, which further discussion with the finance director to delve into that a bit more. There were some adjustments made in a handful of departments to adjust staff hours from 35 hours a week to 40 hours a week. And there were some offsetting reductions in overtime in those divisions. So you'll see that in a few places. There was the elimination of a position in elderly services division, which is currently vacant. And I believe, was it a part-time position in the clerk's office?
Yes.
The 5-year plan did not, the 5-year plan projected a flat salary and wage levels throughout the 5-year plan. So there's somewhat of a discrepancy there. Overall, it's about $150,000 in the entire budget. Employee benefits, we see health insurance costs rising by 7.6%, adding about $750,000 to the general fund budget. That is in line with the projections that were built into the 5-year plan, and we know that the city is looking at some options that are on the table. None of those other options have been built into this budget at this time. What's projected in the budget is based on the original plans, 7.6% increase. The pension contribution for the police department, it increases by $500,000 over the current year. This is based on the estimated ADEC that the city received from Milliman in mid to late March. It is about $500,000 less than what was projected in the 5-year plan, but it's based on the most recent estimates provided by the actuary.
Julia, may I ask, what is the assumed long-term investment rate of return for the police pension?
Do you have that readily available for me?
I don't have that at my fingertips.
We'll have to look that up.
I thought it was 7.5. I thought it was 7.75, but I don't know. That's what I thought it was going, but I may be wrong, so I don't know.
My last discussion with the fund manager was somewhere between 7 and 10, but I never got a hard number from him.
7.7.
Well, depending on where the market was moving, yeah. I would tend to assume on the lower
Yeah.
end.
Okay, so that could be a follow-up item, that is not a range, that is a specific amount that the ADEC was built when it was developed. It assumed a certain rate of return as opposed to what you're actually seeing occur in the market, but I would just like to know as a follow-up what you're currently assuming.
We're checking the letter, it might be in the letter. No. Okay, we'll follow up.
That covers kind of the large employee benefit categories. There was a small adjustment for life insurance, I believe, in the order of a couple $1,000. In terms of non-payroll expenses, these kind of move around. Most of them are held flat. There's some movement for specific adjustments, either because in some cases the finance director did some maintenance to accounts where things were perhaps being charged to an account that was not really valid any longer, and so there was some cleaning up there. There are also some adjustments where prior year actuals indicated that an appropriate budgeted amount could be moved downward. And in some cases, we had to address a higher cost than were reflected in the current year's budget. The current year budget program in some savings on the solid waste management and street lighting area. Those savings didn't materialize to the degree that were originally projected, and so those adjustments have been made going forward. Again, this is more, for the most part, in line with what the 5-year plan contemplated, which was 2% per year increases as an inflationary factor for non-payroll items. Again, the larger adjustments generally are related to something specific happening in the budget, the street lighting area. Debt service. In the proposed budget, we see that decline by about $340,000. The debt service in the budget provides for debt requirements on existing issued debt and an allocation for an additional interest payment related to a planned fall bond issue. We may need to revisit that amount as we go through the bond planning process with the bond advisor. After seeing the debt service projections in the 5-year plan, we raised some questions about what's in and what's out. We need to deconstruct those numbers with the bond advisor and just validate that what we have in the FY budget is sufficient. It looks to be close. It looks to be in line or at least close to what I would have expected to see based on the agenda item we had at the April Whmarb meeting discussing the ban issue that was just concluded. And the debt service requirements in the recommended budget year are about $900,000 less than what was in the 5-year plan. The reason for that is the 5-year plan, in addition to those projects that I mentioned, are included in the budget year, so existing debt service and planned debt service for the high school. There was also additional debt built into the 5-year plan to allow for additional public infrastructure, roads, bonding. That has not happened, and it's not, based on the budget, it doesn't appear there's anything contemplated for the public works side of things for the fall bond issue that are getting developed. Education funding is in the published budget declines by 0.4%, about $330,000. This appears to have been an error, and I believe the intent was to level fund education in the mayor's recommended budget. That's a correction that will have to be made going forward. So using level funding as the intent and what was meant to be proposed, that is somewhat less than what was in the 5-year plan. The 5-year plan, to refresh your memory, built in 0.4% increases each year for education funding. And again, if anything, the incremental increases in the ECS funding would go to support that. And then the last general area, in the area of contingency, I mentioned that those two large items, the $1.75 million for deficit reduction and the $250,000 for Whmarb expenses, are not carried forward. There are a couple of items that were in the 5-year plan and built into this contingency category that were not programmed into the recommended budget, and that is a claims margin, which was originally calculated at 3% of whatever the budgeted health insurance would be. So it's about $320,000 that was in the plan, that was not in the recommended budget. And there was also some seed funding for contributions to a future open trust. The plan included $50,000, not included in the FY20 budget. And then lastly, there's the $125,000 that was earmarked for addressing some administrative capacity needs in finance and employee management areas. That funding is carried in the budget. It's been shifted into the controller's office. The city has interviewed consultants to help them put together a plan for whatever staffing or process changes they're going to make, and I believe they're close to closing in on a selection there. But that funding has been moved out of contingency and up into the operations area. I'll stop there.
Does anybody have any?
This is Secretary McCaw. I'm just going to give a couple of comments before I unfortunately have to step off the line. First of all, Julian, thank you very much. You did an outstanding job going through the major components of the budget submitted by West Haven. And West Haven, I do want to commend you on some of the cost savings that you captured throughout the budget process and the quality job that you've done. A few things that I would want to note. It is found with proper and strong financial and budgeting practices with respect to health insurance claims to have a claims margin for volatility. And so, as we both know, people recommend a claims margin ranging from 2 to 3%. I would recommend that that be an item that be reconsidered in terms of your fiscal year 2020 budget. The second thing that I want to note, maybe two more items. Obviously, there's ongoing work with respect to the health insurance consideration for going to the state partnership. And we're hoping in the upcoming Whmarb or one thereafter that we'll be prepared to provide an update on that. But in addition to the observations with respect to the mill rate, I just want to highlight again that your original plan did assume $1.2 million of efficiency savings that are not in the fiscal 20 budget. So there are at least two assumptions that have been removed, yet continued reliance on municipal restructuring funds. And from my perspective, those are two items that are still open to discussion. I think we have an opportunity to move the needle on efficiencies and budgetary savings beyond what you've currently done. I think you're well on your way to achieving, to making progress in that regard. But those two items particularly give you an opportunity to do what is ultimately contemplated by the Whmarb statutes, and that is to be financially sustainable in an independent fashion. And so as we continue this process through deliberation and action at the full committee level, those will be two items that are that I'd like to continue to have follow-up conversations with you on. And so those are the comments that I will provide. I'll be on the line for another 15 minutes, but I just want to turn it back over to Deputy Attorney.
Thank you. Can I answer those? I want to get some feedback from some of the members.
She's only going to be on for 15 minutes, and she made specific, like the claims margin's a big thing for me, and I did include it, so that's why I'm talking.
Okay.
Secretary McCoy, I just want to point out, in the budget, we did include it. We included it in 19, but we just put it as one healthcare line item in our, it was 9.5, it went to 9.9 million per mayor and council changes, because that was one of the changes after I released the budget. Then we took the 9.9 million and applied the 7.6%. Now I know that when UHY was doing it, they split out so to show like a number so you could see, but it's in there. I'm looking right at it in the 19 budget, and went from the 9.5 to the 9.9. The health insurance, I agree, we are still working on it. Michael Malone is trying to set up an appointment to get Deb Testa locked in, and also Siegel Group together, because we're having trouble reconciling the numbers to what they were saying the savings are. And the last thing, as far as the efficiencies, we were told during the last session, so that's why I want to make clear on this, because some people were here and some people were not, that unless we could realize before the release of our budget these, put good dollars to it for efficiencies, that they didn't want efficiencies in the budget, in an actual budget, and wouldn't approve it. And that's what it was when Secretary Barnes was here. So if there's new rules, we'll do our best to change to the new rules, but those were the rules that were applied through, the beginning of December.
Secretary.
Sure, and if I could just respond to you, thank you for your follow-up, Mayor Rossi. I'm more so thinking along the lines of what you're currently pursuing on the healthcare side of the house. As you know, part of the next steps that I have requested is a comprehensive presentation that walks through the savings as well as the timeline. And so if you believe that there are savings that could materialize in fiscal year 2020 by that shift, subject to Whmarb approval, that would be the only savings, if you will, and maybe that's not an efficiency saving, that I would recommend you consider as a part of your fiscal 2020 budget submission. Now, that being said, I think the general spirit of what I'm trying to convey is, to the extent that there are tools that you either agreed to when the plan was being submitted to have the state subsidize the city of West Haven, and to the extent that those tools are still available, it would be my expectation that the city would continue to live up to that commitment. But I know that we have differing views, and we're going to continue to have that conversation, and ultimately Whmarb will weigh in and make a final decision. So with all due respect, those are my final thoughts, and I'm going to leave it to the rest of the Whmarb subcommittee members to ask you more questions and grill you a little bit more on the fiscal 20 submittal. Thank you.
I'm not sure who had their hand, but first, Scott, did you have something you wanted to say?
I had a quick question. I think for Julie and maybe for the city. It seems like you said at the outset that additional increases in ECS would go toward education. That was the intent.
Yes.
Yet there's a small increase, $130,000, but the education budget is $5,000.
I'm sorry, can you repeat what you said about the small increase? Because
Small projected increase in ECS, basically.
In the state budget.
In the state. And so I kind of want to understand where that pledge for increased ECS funding with education doesn't quite land.
So, generally speaking about ECS and the way that the Alliance funding is treated, that is, for lack of a better word, is increases in Alliance funding have, may be used to offset the locality's contribution to education. So the way this was set up was that in the plan was to level fund education, assuming that there would be some increases over time, but those would just flow directly to the Board of Ed. And then for math purposes, you would budget the revenue flat, knowing that there may be something additional coming in that would apply to any increases on these financial statement. I think that was a long way of saying if the increases in the revenue item are not projected and the increases on the expenditure side are not projected.
But since this is a balanced budget and the increases are included, shouldn't there be?
So the increase in the ECS is not reflected in the recommended budget. It's shown as a flat.
There's $136,000 difference, I believe.
Should be 45 million and change.
Yes, it shows, it comes out at zero when you start talking about $45 million. But we have 096, or I'm sorry, pick any serious numbers you want.
I know what that is. That's on in the actual column.
Mm-hmm.
So that was an adjustment for prior year's excess special, what's the right terminology?
I think it says excess cost.
So this
Excess costs is incorporated into the ECS account for budgeting purposes.
So the formula grant stays level, and then there's an adjustment.
Yeah, so, a couple things. One, just to comment on what the mayor's understanding as far as the efficiency savings go. My understanding from what this board said, and someone on the board, feel free to correct me if you recall differently, was that the efficiency savings were built in to start actually for fiscal year 19, okay? And because of kind of a long back and forth with the 5-year plan, what we gave you was a break. Said, okay, you don't have to do it for fiscal year 19, but then we expected it for fiscal year 20, 21, 22, 23. There was never a statement that was made that said, hey, if you don't think you can, don't put it in there. Because part of your overall projection of fund balance and things like that were projected on these efficiencies. And I don't know what you mean, Frank, when you use the word soft savings. Okay, I know you weren't here for this, but those were hard savings that accounted for over $1 million minus a 0.25% administrative fee.
Were there, and again,
There was 5 of them.
Were there items actually identified?
Yes, there was.
Okay.
And they accounted for $1 million, I want to say $1.6 million apiece, and then minus out 0.25% for an administrative cost to implement them. Yes, that's what they account. I believe that was about the number. So it was pretty sizable over 5 years. So that's a little concerning. That's not built in. I absolutely agree with the secretary's comments with regard to how this is, the overall budget is structured. I do want to just veer off and ask about the $9.9 million number that the mayor put forward that is inclusive of healthcare with the basically the extra 3%. Does that number make sense?
It doesn't to me. Well, for current year, I was speaking to next year's budget.
That's what that's what I'm talking about. Next year's budget.
So next year's budget, the base funding for health insurance and claims management is $1 think on the order of 10.6 million. Then, in addition to that, the plan had another 319,000 or so as the claims margin. And that was if I'm missing something in the proposed budget, I'm certainly open to being corrected.
Okay, I'd just like clarification on that
Yeah.
particular question. So those were real numbers that were built in. So it's not a soft savings, whatever you mean by that as far as your terminology goes. It was a real budgetary number that was put forward to us in a 5-year plan. Commenting on, and I don't want to, I understand that the chair wants to move this along, so I'll get into more of this at another meeting, the committee or the board. But a couple of things. Commenting on the issue of where, this touting of running a surplus and somehow West Haven has turned the corner. West Haven hasn't turned the corner. You haven't turned the corner. You're still off the road as far as I'm concerned. Okay? There's no surplus for this city. This city got $8 million, $6 million, respectively. Really 6 and 6 if you carve out the restricted funds and the $250,000 for us. Without those the financial support from Whmarb, you would be in deficit. Okay, number one. Number two is, as far as any surplus goes, what I would like, because it's been stated by the mayor and yourself, that with the surplus of last year, projected surplus of this year, I want to know with the any layoffs or furloughs or things like that, which are already calculated in all these plans. But I want to know, outside of the Whmarb money being infused to your budget, what actions the city took to account for any surplus or savings. Because the only reason why I see that you have surplus is because we gave you a ton of money. If we didn't give you that money, you'd have no surplus. You'd be in a multi-million-dollar deficit, as this city has been for years, okay? And I think if we keep having this delusional thought of what the financial state of West Haven is, in 2, 3, 4, 5 years, okay? After after the money's stopped, even though we'll still be in here, all right? You guys will be right back to where you were before we got here. Right? There is the budget as proposed to me is perplexing. You've got massive pension obligations with your Allentown Fire. The police is pretty solid, but I mean you did bond out $63 million for that years ago. You have OPEB obligations that are not now being funded in this plan in the current budget, although they were counted as part of the 5-year plan as presented with FY20, the previous 5-year plan. It's just absolutely mind-blowing to me that anybody would sit here and look at the finances of West Haven and think that in any way they're possible. And I'm not saying that people aren't putting in an effort to the degree that they have the ability to make changes, right? But this city is in serious fiscal problems. It has. And to recognize anything less, to me, makes me want to sit there and say, you know what, pull back all our money and figure it out on your own. Because what we become is just an enabler to get you to, in 4 years, to get you to where you were 2 years ago. All right, I watched the town council meeting the other night, and mind you that these things with a proposed 0.99 mil increase, which we don't know what that number is. So when we took out that 0.99 mil increase, we don't know how much money then in revenue, tax revenue, we lost by doing that.
Roughly $2 million per mil.
Oh, okay, all right. I thought that question was okay. That's fine. So it's $2 million, $2.2 million per mil. So that money comes out, although we have Allentown Pension Fund that's about, what, 80% underfunded?
Correct.
Okay. That we have pretty substantial OPEB liabilities and whatnot. This 5-year plan that included a tax levy to the citizens of West Haven was proposed by the mayor. It did get in an overall scope of a 5-year plan. It was given an approval by, I believe, everybody on the council with the exception of one no vote and one abstention or absentee council member. And I can appreciate, the struggles that you have, whether it be a mayor or council members, of having to increase taxes. But at the same time, that's because for years the bill wasn't paid. Okay, so people got to pay the bill. And when I listen to and go through this budget, and I listen to things at the council meeting, issues of the library, and cuts to that, right? Now, those are, internal decisions, to a degree, but you know what? I think I have the right, since we're, looking at millions of dollars here, and if you wanted to cut the police department, I would absolutely object to it. So, to look at things that actually enhance the community. We touched on that a little bit when the mayor proposed a flat-funded capital for 5 years, and we talked about we need to improve sidewalks and parks to bring people in, right, for economic development. To remove $2 million out of the budget that was already in theory passed or proposed and passed, when you have what appeared to be certainly a concern of the constituency, services with the library. I look at looking at the management, the administration for the Allentown Fire Department. I see a $50,000 reduction there in salaries, management salaries, from 259 to 209.
Correct.
What is that? So that had to be a position cut?
No, that's a deputy chief's position that has not been filled. It's only being budgeted for half a year in 2020. So that position will start in January.
Is
So
it
the
currently
bud-
vacant?
It's currently vacant.
So, all right, the deputy's vacant. Do you have a chief there?
We do. The chief is doing his job, the deputy's job, and the fire marshal's job.
Okay, so, and whoever is the chief has been, they're like an acting chief or been fully appointed
Acting
the chief?
chief. Acting
Okay,
chief.
so you basically don't have a chief, you have a deputy.
We have a deputy who's assumed the role of chief.
Who's acting chief and doing the fire marshal's job.
Correct.
And then you're looking to keep that one person doing 3 jobs for 6 more months into the fiscal year? That makes that, from a just sheer management standpoint, certainly from a public safety standpoint, that to me is not a wise decision. You need a command structure in any of your public safety departments, and I would absolutely rethink that, and certainly budget to have. Well, I guess so. You have 2 people. When the deputy is the deputy, he's also the fire marshal, by just virtue of that setup.
Correct.
Okay. I would that you budget for the full salary of the deputy, the full salary of the chief, or however you've broken it out, and get those positions filled for the fiscal year. It's detrimental, not only to span of control and all those things, but just to, there is a cost of a little bit of consistency in command and seeing your boss every day and those things. And to me, for $50,000, when you just sliced 2-point-something million out of your budget by not putting forward the tax increase that you put forward, to me is an issue. I see positions in the controller. Is this the 40-hour increase that Julian was talking about?
Yes.
Okay, and we went to 40 hours, why?
It's 35, they went from 35 to 40.
Right, and so you had, I'm going to assume 2 individuals here go from 55,000 to 63,000, right? And 56 to 64. Oh, wait, hold on.
And there should be a reduction in overtime.
Right. So that's, my math here is, let me see, so you go from 56 to 64,000, okay. And why did that happen? I mean, I understand you added hours, but why?
First off, why it happened is because in the past, one person was treated differently than the rest, and there were 4 or 5 other ones. And what we have in West Haven is what...
Could you explain? I don't know what that means.
I'm trying to explain.
Okay.
Let me finish, I'd be happy to explain.
Yeah, go on.
There's a difference between 40 hours and 35 plus 5. So one person was given 40 hours, while the same people in the same group were given 35 plus 5. The difference is, if you get 40 hours, that means when you're getting your entitlements, you're getting paid out at 8 hours a day instead of 7 hours a day. The other group of I think there were 4 or 5, when they took entitlements, even though they worked 8 hours all the other days, but because they were 35 plus 5 and not a 40-hour position, when they went on vacation, they only got 7 hours a day. If they had a holiday, even though the Friday before and the Tuesday after they'd be working 8 hours, they would only get paid for 7 hours. So what it was the one person to bring back to the 35 plus 5 caused serious union issues. So we brought the other 3, 4 people, and I can get the exact number of people and their wages too, because not everybody was in finance that this was. It was a fair way, and making everyone being treated fairly, which I absolutely believe in, and it did lower the overtime hours.
Okay, so basically you had, I don't know what 35 plus 5 means. It means they worked overtime?
It means they basically worked 40 hours a week.
And you paid them time and a half for the 5?
No time and a half.
Straight time for the
Straight
5, and then time and a half.
And these are unionized or not unionized?
Unionized, that's why it needed to be done. It was 681 union.
And so now they've been moved to 40 hours?
Correct.
Yes,
Okay, so now when they're off on vacation, they get 8 hours of pay?
correct.
And that was done with one of the unions?
681, yes.
As a MOU?
Yes, they signed off on it, so it may very well be an MOU. I don't know if Beth is here. Beth is here.
Yes.
How do we do that?
When was that done?
Very good. When was that done, Beth?
I'm going to say probably in January.
Was that brought before this board?
No.
No,
No,
Why?
I'm not sure the fiscal impact would hit the level.
it was only,
It was like a side agreement, wasn't it?
yeah, it was a side agreement. It was several $1,000s. It wasn't tens of thousands of dollars.
And what the law says is, since we have the same authority as the city council, and what the law says under the Municipal Employees Relations Act is anything that has a financial impact to the municipality has to be brought before the legislative body.
Did this go to council?
No.
Okay. So we'll have to look at it.
So therefore, not only should it have gone to the legislative body, it should come before us.
We'll look at it.
Because I'd like to just look at the numbers to see if they work. I have a little bit of reservation to kind of taking it, the theory of how things work and assuming there's a savings. It's like when we hired the ERS director, and instead of giving her health care, she gave, kind of gave it back, and there's a lump sum payout, but she's married to another West Haven employee, so it really costs, it didn't save West Haven anything, it cost you $4,000 a year. And, I think some things need to be thought through with some expertise, but the reality is that any MOUs, side letters, anything like that have financial impacts under the law have to be presented to the council, to the legislative body, and therefore have to be presented to us.
We'll look into that.
Okay, I appreciate that. One other thing that was brought up at in reading, looking at the council, the town council presentation on, I think it was the second or the third, where somebody brought up, or there was a question about a payout for unused vacation, Mayor, for you? Some type of,
Vacation bylaw, yes.
okay, where is that in the charter or
It's not in the charter, it's in a resolution, and there's an extensive legal opinion. Attorney Tiernan, believe me, we have gone over this. There's a legal opinion from Lee Tiernan on that, so.
But, I mean, I'm not worried about Lee's interpretation of it. But that's codified somewhere? That's in like the charter or the
It's not in the
ordinances?
charter. There's a resolution that states different items, if you will, for anyone who is not in the union. It's not only for elected officials, it is for appointed
For
officials as well.
Yeah, when you state a resolution, I'll inquire with the chair of the town council. Is that a resolution, is a binding, it's an ordinance, or is it just a kind of thought, like, this is what we think should happen?
Yeah, it's not an ordinance, it's a resolution that mandates that the, whatever the contents of that resolution carries forward. In that case, it's a resolution for benefits for appointed and elected officials. It outlines a series of benefits for appointed officials and then a series of benefits for elected officials.
Okay. Yeah, that'd be great. I'll take up the rest of my questions at the next subcommittee.
We still have, I'm sorry, why don't we go to, and then Dave, are you still on the phone? Did you also have questions? Because we're going to go to,
I just have two, and they don't relate to taxes. One is there has been some discussion that in the event the city opts to do the state partnership plan, that there would be a bill for IBNR that comes due. And there was some discussion, although no decision, that some of the Whmarb funds would be earmarked for that one-time payment. The notion being that Whmarb funds should be used to help you make structural changes so that you're going to be financially sustainable. And that seems to be one way to do it if you choose to do that. So I don't know if this is something that Whmarb needs to give you guidance on or what, but some of that Whmarb funding may not be available for general purposes, but be earmarked, and I think that should be on an agenda item at some point.
I think that from what I'm also hearing, it sounds like there's a general healthcare discussion that's going to take some significant time with the consultants. So I'm going to suggest to Julian, and I think the secretary may be on the phone, that there may have to be a special meeting of the subcommittee, because I think this could go on for a significant amount of time. There's a lot of issues that have to be looked at, and I would really hate to see it get lost, in either a lengthy Whmarb agenda or just lost, because this is one of the single most important items that the city's going to have to deal with if it's going to restructure itself to go forward. So I would really like to suggest that when you all come up with those dates where everybody, and also can do their homework before they come into the room, that we do have a special meeting at which time your issue will be raised, and I think there may be some other healthcare related issues.
And would that be in a situation such that a decision could be made in time for the FY20 budget?
I believe so.
Okay, good.
Yes. I think there's still some, and I'm looking at Frank, I think there's still some open issues
Yes.
about information that might have been contained in a report. So I think before the city adopts its budget and the Whmarb approves or disapproves, that's a key component to the budget.
I think that's good.
And to your point, that could be part of the $6 million. So I think that's
Correct.
really important.
Right.
Nick, just respond is that I believe I have had conversations with Julian. My personal feeling is that the 1.75 that we did not need for the deficit funding should be used to pay down the IBNR.
This will be another agenda item. I don't want to get into that.
Yes, but that was.
I can tell you my vote on that right now.
And any savings, and I've had a conversation with the mayor, is that any savings that we generate from moving to the 2.0 plan, the majority of that should be gone to pay down the unfunded liabilities and the pensions at the end of that.
Again, I think it's good to have another conversation, and as long as that's earmarked, then that's good. The second item was there was a requirement or something that you come up with an asset sale plan. And I don't know if this was under the category of efficiencies, but there were some assets that you were thinking about selling, some old schools or something like that, and also some increase into, I think Commissioner Jackson had suggested, some potential savings in solid waste management through a regional entity, and I saw that, you had an increase in solid waste there. I'm just wondering what the timetable is for those kinds of savings into FY20, because I agree with Pat that, there was a pass given for 19 to have hard savings baked into the budget, as opposed to, if you can do it, that's gravy. It was baked in. So to the extent that issue, asset sales, other kinds of efficiencies can be wrestled to the ground. I know there were some deadlines here on some things, but for the FY20 budget, as opposed to we'll get around to it next year. Just wanted to, if we're all on the same page, that that'll get done before the final approval, one way or the other.
I'm obviously late to the conversation and so, but just as a caution, we need to be careful about asset sales because there may be legal issues.